Have you ever felt that quiet little voice in the back of your mind, whispering that something is wrong? Not loud, not dramatic. Just a subtle tug at your gut telling you that the life you're living isn't what it seems. That's exactly how this story begins, with a husband who sensed something long before he understood it, and with a betrayal so calculated that karma herself had to step in. Back in the early 2000s, he lived a simple life. A quiet neighborhood, a modest home, two little kids who filled every room with laughter, and a wife he genuinely believed he knew, truly knew, inside and out. But routines have a way of hiding things. They make lies easier to slip through the cracks. And soon, he would discover just how big those cracks already were. His wife had always been close to her parents. They lived about an hour and a half away, so a visit here and there wasn't strange. But suddenly, she was making that drive 2, sometimes 3 times a week. At first, it didn't scream affair. Life gets busy. Parents get older. Excuses make sense until they don't. And then the kids started talking. "Mommy took us to Grandma's again, twice this week." He froze when he heard that, not because it was proof, but because it confirmed what his gut had been pushing him to see. He confronted his wife gently, asked if everything was okay. Her answer came too fast. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're just being paranoid," she said. But she had never been a good liar. Not once. That was the moment the unease turned into suspicion. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't even bring it up again. He simply walked into the garage one night and checked the odometer on her car. Every week, an extra 400 miles. Not 90. Not the quick trip to her parents' house. 400. And his heart sank. Because now he knew. She wasn't visiting family. She was visiting someone else. Then fate stepped in. One morning, he walked into their office and found a sticky note on the desk. Her AOL password, written clearly, carelessly, almost invitingly. He stared at it for a long time. Part of him still wanted to trust her, still wanted to believe he was overthinking. But eventually, the truth mattered more than the comfort of the lie. He logged in, and what he found shattered him. Email after email, message after message. Conversations between his wife and her college best friend, laughing about how she was meeting up with her high school ex, making plans behind his back, even mocking that man's wife for letting herself go after having kids. It wasn't just cheating. It was cruelty. His hands shook as he printed every single message. Proof. Cold. Undeniable. But he needed more. A friend who worked in law enforcement pointed him to a PI named Ron, a former cop, tough and brutally thorough. He gave Ron everything. The emails, the mileage logs, the timeline, his suspicions. A week later, Ron called. "I've got what you're looking for." And the file he delivered was devastating. Photos, receipts, exact dates and times. It was like watching a movie he never wanted to be in. His wife dropping the kids off at her parents', meeting the man for lunch, then heading into a rundown motel for hours at a time. Every single week. And every night, she came home, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "I love you." Like nothing had happened. He sat awake that night, staring into the dark, remembering his own childhood, the affairs, the screaming, the collapse of his parents' marriage. He had sworn his kids would never go through that. But here it was, history trying to repeat itself. He wouldn't let it. He hired a divorce lawyer immediately. But he wasn't done. He needed to know who Bob really was, the man his wife had blown up their family for. And Ron delivered again. Bob was married, with 3 kids, and he worked as a VP at his father-in-law's company. That was the moment something in the husband shifted. Not rage, not despair, just clarity. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to fight. All he had to do was let the truth do the destroying. Timing was everything. One morning, his wife was at work when a process server walked into her office in front of her co-workers and handed her divorce papers. While she stood there in shock, Ron drove straight to Bob's home and handed a full report to Bob's wife. Photos, emails, motel receipts, all of it. She broke down, then something in her hardened. Within days, she emptied their joint accounts, packed her kids, and left. Next came the fallout. When her father, Bob's boss, learned the truth, he fired Bob on the spot. And because the home Bob lived in belonged to her family, he was evicted too. From there, things spiraled into chaos. Their divorce was a public disaster. Police were called. Restraining orders were filed. Rumors spread like wildfire. Bob's clean life disintegrated. And the husband. He stayed silent. He didn't have to lift a finger. The truth carried more weight than any revenge plot ever could. Years later, Bob seemingly vanished. No social media, no public record. His life faded into nothing. But his ex-wife thrived. She took over her father's company, raised her kids, rebuilt her world from the ground up. As for the husband's ex-wife, they stayed civil for the sake of the kids, holidays, graduations, phone calls. But the moment those kids became adults, he cut ties completely. No anger, no bitterness, just peace. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest revenge of all. The truth carried more weight than any revenge plot ever could. And the coldest revenge doesn't always come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes the most devastating justice is quiet, calm, inevitable. Because people who build their lives on lies eventually fall by their own hand. All he had to do was step back and watch karma arrive right on time. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and drop a comment. Would you have handled it quietly or gone nuclear? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal and pity revenge. Thanks for watching.
I used to be so proud of my husband. So proud. Whenever he'd call from his office, his voice buzzing with excitement to say, "Honey, I've got to go to Shanghai," or "The team needs me in London," I'd feel this pride swell in my chest. This was it. This was the life we'd worked for. He was brilliant, ambitious, and the world was finally seeing it. So when he told me he needed to go on another business trip, I'd pack his bags and transfer him the money without a second thought. I was investing in his success, in our future. I'd fold his shirts, make sure he had the right currency, and send a little extra so he could have a nice dinner on the company. Our joint account was our war chest for his career. Every withdrawal, every transfer was a step up the ladder for him, for us. I was his silent partner, the financial and logistical backbone of his skyrocketing career. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined in my wildest nightmares, was that I wasn't funding a business. I was funding a lie. A lie so vast and intricate it would consume everything I thought was real. I was paying for a life I had no idea he was living, with a woman I had no idea existed. It's funny how memory works. Looking back now feels like watching a movie about someone else's life. The early years with Liam, they were golden. The kind of years people write songs about. We met in our last year of college. I was buried in textbooks at the library, totally overwhelmed, and he just sat down at my table with two coffees and a smile that could disarm armies. He told me he'd been watching me for weeks and couldn't stand seeing me look so defeated. He just had this effortless charm, a confidence that wasn't arrogant but warm. It felt like stepping into the sun. We were inseparable from that day on. He was studying business, and I was in art history. He was all about 5-year plans and conquering the world. I was about finding beauty in the brushstrokes of a long dead painter. We were complete opposites, but it felt like we were two halves of a perfect whole. He grounded my idealism, and I softened his sharp edges. He proposed a year after we graduated on a trip to the coast. He'd just landed his first real job at a big tech firm, and the future felt like this wide open highway. He got down on one knee as the sun was setting and told me that none of his plans, none of his ambition meant a thing without me, and I believed him with every fiber of my being. Our wedding was small and beautiful. We wrote our own vows. I promised to support his dreams, no matter how big. He promised to always be my home. We bought a charming little house with a big garden that I fell in love with. It needed work, but we were young and full of energy. We spent weekends painting walls and dreaming, sitting on the floor of an empty room, eating pizza from the box while he mapped out our future. In 5 years, he'd be a junior VP. In 10, a senior VP. He wanted 2 kids, a dog, and a summer home by a lake. And I was right there with him, nodding along, my heart so full it felt like it would burst. The first few years of our marriage were a blur of hard work and happiness. Liam was a star at his company, smart, charismatic, and he worked harder than anyone. He'd come home late, his eyes tired but shining, and tell me about the deals he was closing. I was his sounding board, his cheerleader. I'd listen for hours, fascinated by this corporate world I didn't understand, but so proud of how he navigated it. My own career was quieter. I was working at a local art gallery, curating small shows. I loved it, but the pay was modest. As Liam's career took off, his salary quickly dwarfed mine. It was never a problem. It was our money. His success was my success. About 4 years in, the travel started. The first trip was to a tech conference in San Francisco. He was so excited. I helped him pack, fussing over his ties. When he came back, he brought me a beautiful scarf and stories that made it all feel so glamorous. Soon, San Francisco turned into Chicago, then Austin, then New York. At first, it was once a quarter. We'd miss each other terribly, but the reunions at the airport, with him sweeping me up in his arms, felt like a scene from a movie. The trips were a symbol of his status, so we decided together that I'd cut back my hours at the gallery. It just made sense. Someone needed to manage the home, the bills, the life that happened while he was jetting across the country. I was happy to do it. It was my contribution. I took over all our finances, organizing everything into spreadsheets. He said he was terrible with details and that I was saving his life. It made me feel essential. I was the CEO of our home, so he could be the star in the boardroom. We were a team, that's what I told myself. Every time I transferred money from our savings to his personal account for his expenses, it was all for us. The shift was subtle. So subtle, I didn't even register it at first. It was more like that feeling in the air right before a storm. The quarterly trips became monthly. Then it seemed like every few weeks he was packing a suitcase again. The destinations got more exotic. It wasn't just Chicago anymore. It was Dubai, Tokyo, Singapore. My friends were envious. He's such a globetrotter, they'd say. You must be so proud. And I really was. But a tiny, quiet part of me just started to feel lonely. The house was so empty. The king-sized bed felt like a cold, vast ocean. The first real flicker of unease was a charge on our credit card. I was doing my monthly ritual, going through the statements with a cup of tea, and there it was, nestled between a flight to Miami and his hotel, a purchase from a high-end lingerie store for over $400. I remember just staring at it. Liam had never bought me lingerie. It wasn't his thing. He'd buy me books or jewelry, but never something so intimate. When he got home, I asked him about it, trying to sound casual. Oh, hey, I saw this charge from La Perla. Did you pick something up for me? I was smiling, half expecting him to pull a little bag out of his luggage. He just looked blank for a second. Then, a slick smile. Ah, that. No, honey, it was a gift for a client's wife. It's a cultural thing with this new Japanese team. You have to give these elaborate presents, just part of doing business. It sounded plausible, a little weird, but plausible. Liam was so good at explaining things, at smoothing over any doubt. He made me feel a little naive. So I dropped it, I put the expense under client relations in my spreadsheet and moved on. But the image of that charge stuck with me. Then the money started getting tight. Liam claimed his company's reimbursement policy was a nightmare. He'd say, "It's just easier if I pay for it on our card and I'll get the check in a few months. It all comes out in the wash." So I was fronting thousands of dollars a month. The reimbursement checks he talked about always seemed to be delayed or smaller than he'd said, because accounting messed up. I started dipping into my personal savings, money I had from before we were married. I started taking on more freelance work, writing for art auction catalogs late into the night. I was exhausted all the time, but I told myself it was temporary, an investment. He was on the brink of something huge. He kept telling me a massive merger that would make his career. His behavior at home started to change too. He was more distant, glued to his phone, not just one phone, but two. He had his personal iPhone and a cheap, nondescript Android. When I asked, he had a smooth answer ready. "It's a burner phone, babe, for international travel, better security. You can't be too careful with the kind of data I'm handling." Of course, it made perfect sense. I accepted it, just like I accepted everything else. The little inconsistencies started piling up. He was on a trip to Seattle for a tech summit. A friend of mine who lives in Seattle posted tons of photos from that exact summit. I scrolled through every single one looking for Liam. He wasn't there. When I mentioned it, he didn't miss a beat. Oh, I was stuck in breakout sessions the whole time. Totally separate wing. Barely saw daylight. Another time, he called me from Berlin, complaining about jet lag. In the background, I could clearly hear seagulls and waves crashing. I've been to Berlin. It's landlocked. When I pointed it out, he laughed. "It's a sound machine, honey. The hotel provides them to help with sleep. A German thing, I guess. A German thing. Right?" Each time, there was an explanation. Each time, I chose to believe it. What was the alternative? That the man I'd built my life with was a liar. That was unthinkable. It was easier to believe in Japanese gifting culture and German sound machines. It's amazing what you'll convince yourself of to avoid being heartbroken. I read somewhere that almost all families, something like 96%, keep secrets. I just assumed our secret was the mounting debt I was trying to manage, the stress of his incredible career. I thought I was protecting us. The breaking point for my finances, anyway, came 6 months before it all imploded. Liam came to me, his face a mask of stress. He needed to make one last big trip to seal the merger, a multi-city tour, Hong Kong, Sydney, then London. It was going to be incredibly expensive. He said he needed the funds up front in cash for local fixers and discretionary expenses. That was the phrase he used, discretionary expenses. He needed $20,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. We didn't have $20,000. Not anymore. I showed him the spreadsheets, the dwindling numbers, the rising credit card debt. I felt sick with shame, like I had failed him. He looked at the numbers, his jaw tight. "I know, Sarah, I know it's a lot, but this is it. The final push. After this deal closes, my bonus alone will be 6 figures. We'll pay all of this off and never worry about money again." I promise. He held my face, his eyes boring into mine. Trust me, please, just this one last time. And I did. The next day, I went to our safe deposit box. I took out the diamond earrings my grandmother had left me, the one truly valuable thing I owned. I walked to a jeweler on a quiet street where they wouldn't ask questions. The man offered me a fraction of what they were worth. I took it. The envelope full of cash felt both heavy and dirty. I gave the money to Liam that night. He kissed me, called me his savior. He said he'd pay me back tenfold. I watched him pack my grandmother's legacy tucked into his wallet. As he walked out the door, I felt this profound dread in the pit of my stomach. For the first time, a voice I couldn't silence whispered, "What if this is all a lie?" He was supposed to be in Sydney. For 2 weeks, I lived on instant noodles and anxiety, watching our bank account flatline while picturing him in high stakes meetings. I was so proud and so terrified. The house was quieter than ever. The silence was suffocating, filled with the echoes of my own doubt. It happened on a Tuesday. I was trying to control my spiraling anxiety by cleaning a frantic effort to scrub the unease away. I was in our bedroom tackling Liam's closet. I was reaching up to a high shelf to dust when my fingers brushed against something hard tucked behind a stack of old sweatshirts. It was a phone, not his iPhone, not the burner Android, a third one, a sleek, new model iPhone, identical to his main one, but cold and unfamiliar. My heart started hammering against my ribs. It's another security phone, I told myself, a backup. But the excuse felt flimsy, even in my own head. Why hide it? I just stood there holding it. It felt like a bomb. My hands were shaking. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up with a picture I had never seen. It was Liam on a beach, squinting into the sun, his arm around a woman. A beautiful woman with long, dark hair, laughing with her head thrown back. And she wasn't me. My legs gave out and I dropped to the floor. I couldn't breathe. It was like I'd been punched in the chest. I stared at that picture, and a cold, horrifying clarity washed over me. The password. I needed the password. I tried our anniversary. Access denied. His birthday. Denied. My fingers were trembling so badly I could barely type. Tears blurred my vision. Then I looked at the lock screen photo again. The date stamp. June 10th. The date meant nothing to me. With a sickening lurch, I typed in the 4 digits. 0610. 610. The phone unlocked, and my world ended. Not cracked, not broken, annihilated. The phone opened to his texts. The top conversation was with Olivia. Her last message, sent just hours ago, read, "Miss you, my love. Sydney is amazing, but not the same without you. Hurry home to me. Love." Sydney? But he was in Sydney. My brain short-circuited. He wasn't there for work. He was home with her. No, that didn't make sense. I scrolled up. The conversation went back years, years. Pet names, inside jokes, plans. And then I saw my own name. Sarah is getting suspicious about the money, one of his texts read. I had to sell her a whole story about discretionary expenses. She bought it, of course. She always does. Olivia's reply, "My poor baby, having to deal with that. Don't worry. Soon we'll be on a beach in Bali and she'll be a distant memory." Nausea washed over me so intensely I had to put my head between my knees. I was reading a script to a play where I was the fool, the money source, the obstacle. I clicked on his photo gallery. It was a catalog of his other life. Hundreds of pictures. Liam and Olivia skiing in Aspen, his leadership retreat, Liam and Olivia drinking wine in Napa, his shareholders meeting. There they were in Paris, kissing in front of the Eiffel Tower from the week he was supposedly in Germany, the week I heard the seagulls through the phone. They looked so happy. Like a real couple. They looked like we used to. Then I found the folder that broke me. Our home, pictures of them in an apartment I'd never seen, cooking together, cuddling on a couch, a Christmas tree with presents underneath. He had spent Christmases with her while I was at home, telling our families he was sorry he was stuck finalizing a year-end deal in Zurich. And then the final blow. I found the banking app, logged into an account I didn't recognize, and I saw it. The transfer of the $20,000 from my grandmother's earrings. It went from our joint account to his personal account, and then hours later into this secret account. And from there, a down payment on a condominium, the one in the pictures, our home. I wasn't just funding his affair. I had bought them a house. I had used the one precious thing from my grandmother to build a home for my husband and his mistress. I don't know how long I sat on the floor. The shaking stopped. I just felt this strange, hollow calm. The pain was too big. It was a physical weight on my chest. I picked up the phone, my movements slow and deliberate. I scrolled through the pictures of them, their life, the home I paid for, and I started sending them to myself. Every picture, every text, every transaction. I was building a case. The art historian in me was curating the evidence of my own life's destruction. The next 3 days were an out-of-body experience. I was a ghost in my own life, just going through the motions. Eat, sleep, answer emails. I was just waiting. Liam was due home Friday evening. Every tick of the clock was agonizing. I spent the time preparing. I printed everything, the text, the photos, the bank statements. I laid them out on our dining room table, the one where we hosted Thanksgiving, arranging them chronologically. A timeline of his betrayal, the picture of them in Paris next to the credit card statement for a flight to Berlin, the photo of them toasting with champagne next to the transfer from my savings labeled Client Dinner Fund. It was a museum exhibit of our ruin. By the time I was done, the table was covered. It looked like a police investigation. It was methodical and utterly devastating. Friday evening, I heard his keys in the lock, a sound that used to bring me joy but now sent ice through my veins. The door opened. "Honey, I'm home," he called out. I didn't answer. I just stood in the archway of the dining room and waited. He walked into the hall, his smile fading when he saw my face. "Sarah, you okay? You look pale." He started toward me, arms open for a hug, holding a cheap airport souvenir box. A guilty offering. "Don't," I said. My voice was quiet but hard as steel. It stopped him cold. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of a confusion I now knew was completely fake. I just nodded toward the dining room. "We need to talk." He walked past me. I watched his face as he saw the table. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes scanned the papers, the photos of him and Olivia. I watched the mask of the loving husband dissolve, and for the first time, I saw the man underneath, a cornered, pathetic liar. He looked from the table to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "I found the phone, Liam," I said, my voice starting to shake. "The one in the closet." Even then, he tried to lie. "What phone? Sarah, this is crazy. What is all this?" He waved a hand at the table, trying to act dismissive, but I wasn't that woman anymore. I walked to the table, picked up a photo of him and Olivia kissing on a boat, and held it up. This is from your tech summit in Seattle, right? And this one, I picked up another. This must be the leadership retreat in Aspen. You look so happy. Amazing. You got any work done? His face crumpled. Sarah, listen, it's not what you think. It's not what I think? A hysterical laugh bubbled up. You think I can't understand these or these? I slammed my hand on the bank statements. This is the $20,000 I gave you from my grandmother's earrings. And this is the down payment on your home with her. Did you even thank me when you signed the papers? Did you feel a flicker of gratitude for the fool back home funding your little love nest? He flinched. Please, let me explain. He just broke. He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I'm so, so sorry. Sorry doesn't cut it, I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. Who is Say? It all came spilling out. Olivia was a graphic designer he'd met years ago. It started as a flirtation and then more. She lived just 3 hours away. Many of his business trips were just him driving to her city. The international trips were their vacations. He'd told her I was his bitter ex-wife, making a divorce messy. He'd built two separate realities, and I was the star of the tragic one. He said he always planned to pay me back after his big promotion, that he saw it as just borrowing from our future. I listened, feeling that numbness return. I thought about the statistics you read, how something like 1 in 4 couples deals with infidelity. For a strange moment, it was a comfort. This wasn't some unique tragedy just for me. It was a common, sordid story, and my part in it was over. When he finally stopped talking, he looked up at me, his eyes red and pleading. We can fix this, Sarah. I'll end it with her. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild. Um, I looked at the man I had loved for more than a decade, and I felt naught, just a vast, empty space. No, I said. There is no we to fix. I pointed to his suitcase. Pack the rest of your things and get out of my house. Um, he left that night. The sound of his suitcase wheels on the hardwood floor and the final click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. And then silence, a silence so absolute it rang in my ears. The house, our home, suddenly felt like a hollowed out cavern. For the first few days, I just walked through the rooms, looking at a life that was now a fraud. The grief, when it hit, was a tsunami. It was violent, all-consuming rage, and a sorrow so deep I thought it might kill me. I cried for the woman I had been, that trusting, hopeful girl. I cried for the years I had lost, and I raged at him, at her, and at myself for being so blind. The toll was immense. Constant anxiety, sleepless nights, the physical weight of it all. But underneath the anger, something else was stirring. A tiny spark of the woman who had meticulously gathered the evidence, who had stood her ground and told him to leave. It was a core of strength I'd forgotten I had. Um, the divorce was a nightmare. Unraveling the financial web he'd woven was a forensic mess. My lawyer said financial infidelity is often worse than a physical affair. It's a betrayal of trust and a destruction of your shared security. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had systematically dismantled my life. The condo I'd unwillingly paid for became the monument to his deceit we had to fight over in court. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I threw myself into my work. I left the small gallery and took a job at a major downtown museum. The work was demanding and it required all of my focus. It saved me. For the first time in years, I was investing in myself. My paychecks were mine. My savings account was mine. That feeling of pure independence was intoxicating. I started to heal. I learned to trust my own instincts again, the gut feelings I had ignored for so long. I realized my worth was never tied to his success. It was in my resilience, my passion, and my capacity to love, even if that love had been tragically misplaced. I learned that financial secrecy is a poison. A partnership is about building a dream together with transparency and mutual respect. It's been 2 years. I live in a new apartment downtown, a place that is entirely mine, filled with art that I love. The museum of our ruin is packed away in a box. I don't know what happened to Liam and Olivia, and I truly don't care. Their story is no longer my story. I wasn't just a wife who was cheated on. I was an unwilling investor in my own heartbreak, but I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I took the shattered pieces of my life and I built a new one, a better one, a truer one. This was the hardest experience of my life, and I know that my story, especially the financial deception part, isn't unique. So many of us have been there. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt that gut-wrenching betrayal, please share your own experience or words of encouragement in the comments. Reading your stories and knowing we aren't alone makes all the difference. And if you found strength in this story, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content about finding your power after the pain. In the end, the greatest lie he ever told wasn't about the business trips or the other woman. It was the lie I told myself, that my value was in being his support system. The truth is, my value is in being my own. Now, when I travel, it's for me. I went to Florence last spring and stood in front of Botticelli's Primavera and just cried, not from sadness, but from joy. The money I make builds my future, not someone else's deception. The future is bright, it's mine, and for the first time in a long, long time, it's completely beautifully and unapologetically real.
Let's talk about the exact moment I realized my marriage was being treated like an open audition. I'm standing in the lobby of my husband's office. It's a normal Tuesday, or it should have been. But then I see her. This girl, we'll call her Susan, is walking down the hall like she's trying to manifest a modeling contract in a restaurant supply warehouse. And she's wearing them. You know the ones. The viral scrunch butt TikTok leggings that are basically high-definition 4K for every curve on your body. Now, I'm not a hater. Wear what you want at the gym, but at a professional workplace, where my husband is a manager, that's not a fit. That's a statement. She stops, looks over her shoulder, catches my eye, and gives me this smirk. It wasn't a hello smile. It was a watch what I can do smile. She thought I was going to be the insecure wife who screams at the parking lot and makes herself look crazy. Oh, honey, no, I don't do crazy. I do consequences. If you've ever had to deal with a pick-me girl who thinks your husband is public property, or if you just love a story where the villain gets exactly what they asked for, hit that like button. Subscribe for the Clean Revenge series. Because today, I'm teaching a masterclass on how to dismantle a home wrecker without ever raising your voice. Let's back up. I'm 29. My husband, Ethan, and I have been goals since we were 20. He's a total green flag. I'm talking about the kind of man who still holds the car door open and has a framed photo of our wedding on his desk, right next to his World's Best Dad mug. Ethan worked at this medium-sized restaurant supply company. It's a blue-collar vibe. Everyone's in flannels or polos. It's a family atmosphere. I used to swing by 3 times a week for lunch. I knew the receptionist. I knew the warehouse guys. I knew the owner. And Ethan, he's a locked-in kind of man. Wedding band stays on. If a woman flirted with him at a bar, he'd probably think she was just being really polite. He's a bit oblivious. Bless his heart. But that's why I love him. He's loyal to a fault. So when the company hired a couple of new delivery drivers to handle the holiday rush, I didn't think twice about it until Susan entered the chat. He whispers,
Hey, just a heads up. The new girl is moving a little sus around Ethan.
I laughed it off. I was like, Ethan, the man who spent 40 minutes choosing a brand of paper towels yesterday, he's not noticing a flirt. But then I saw it. Susan walks into the break room. She sees me sitting there with Ethan. I give her a polite, wife of the boss smile. I say, Hi, I'm Ethan's wife. Nice to meet you. Y'all, the way her face dropped, it was like I just told her Christmas was canceled. Her eyes immediately flicked to his left hand. She checked for the ring. And then she looked at me, not with friendliness, but like she was sizing up the competition. From that day on, she was unhinged. She'd accidentally forget how to log her delivery hours and need Ethan to show her again at his desk. She'd hover. She'd giggle. She was doing the damsel in distress routine, and Ethan was just trying to get his spreadsheets done. The red flags weren't just waving. They were setting themselves on fire. Ethan eventually realized something was off because she was getting bold. He told her, point blank, Hey, Susan, I'm happily married. Let's keep it strictly professional. Most people would be embarrassed, right? Most people would crawl into a hole and never come out. Not Susan. She looked him dead in the eye and said, Oh, so am I. But it's always good to have options, isn't it? Just in case. When Ethan told me that, I felt my soul leave my body for a second. Options? My husband isn't a limited time offer at a grocery store, sweetie. He's the whole store. But I stayed calm. I told Ethan, Don't worry about it. Let her play her little games. She's going to trip over her own feet eventually. And boy, did she. The final boss moment happened on a Friday. I went to pick Ethan up for a weekend getaway. I was feeling good, looking cute. I walk in, and Susan is there, getting ready for her last delivery. She wasn't in her uniform. She was in those leggings. And let me be clear, these weren't I'm going to yoga leggings. These were I want everyone in a 3-mile radius to look at my backside leggings. As we walked toward the exit, she made sure to get in front of us. She started this. I can only describe it as a slow-motion hip sway. It was so exaggerated, it was almost comedy. She looked back, saw me watching, and gave me that I win smirk again. In that moment, I didn't feel jealous. I felt insulted. She thought she could disrespect me, my marriage, and the workplace professionalism my husband worked hard to build. all for a little ego boost. I looked at Ethan. He was looking at his phone, checking the GPS for our trip. He didn't even see her. But I did, and I decided right then. Susan needed a hobby, and that hobby was going to be looking for a new job. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and a mission. I didn't call the manager. He was too chill. I called corporate. But I didn't go in as the angry wife. That's a rookie mistake. Corporate hates drama, but corporate loves liability. I dialed the number. I channeled my inner Southern auntie who is deeply concerned about the youth.
Yes, hello? I was just wondering if y'all have a specific dress code for your drivers? Because, see, I had a delivery yesterday, and the young lady who showed up, well, she was wearing these leggings that were so tight, I thought she'd been painted into 'em. My husband and my sons were right there in the driveway, and it was just so inappropriate for a family neighborhood.
I heard the woman on the other end gasp.
Oh dear, that's not our policy at all.
I kept going.
I don't want to get her in trouble. I'm sure she's a sweet girl, but it just looked so unprofessional for such a reputable company. I think her name was Susie or Sam.
The HR lady finished it for me.
Susan, we only have one Susan at that branch.
I hung up, went back to my normal voice, and took a sip of my coffee. Monday morning, I happened to drop by with some muffins. I walk in, and the vibe is cold. Susan is in the manager's office. She's not smirking anymore. She's crying. HR is on the speakerphone. Apparently, corporate didn't just warn her. They did a full review of her conduct. Turns out, once corporate started digging, other people felt safe to talk. They found out she'd been making inappropriate comments to other staff, too. She was put on a final warning, and her hours were cut. She quit 2 weeks later, claiming the job was toxic. A year later, the tea got even hotter. My brother told me she got divorced because her husband caught her with 3 different guys at her new job. Me? I'm currently 8 months pregnant with our second. Ethan and I are thriving. The lesson? Never mistake my silence for weakness. I'm not going to scream at you in a cubicle. I'm going to make sure the options you are looking for include unemployment. If you enjoyed this clean sweep revenge, drop the comments. Tell me, have you ever had to corporate cancel a pick-me girl? I want to read your stories. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Stay classy, stay smart, and remember, the quietest person in the room is usually the one holding all the cards. Bye for now.
My wife tried to weaponize my mental health in court. Then the judge recognized my face. I am Noah Brenner, a man who believes that integrity doesn't need a megaphone. But in a U.S. divorce court, silence can look a lot like guilt. I spent years as a volunteer advocate standing up for victims of abuse in the same courtrooms where I now sat as the accused. My wife, Chloe, was a master of the narrative. She didn't just want a divorce. She wanted a demolition. She wore her designer clothes like armor and treated our marriage like a chess match where I was the only one who didn't know we were playing. The silence of courtroom didn't just feel heavy. It felt like a burial. He's mentally ill. The scream didn't come from a movie set. It came from Chloe. She wasn't whispering to her lawyer. She was shouting for the entire gallery to hear, her voice cracking with the kind of practiced tremors that win Oscars. I sat there, the guy who used to share quiet Sunday mornings with her, now being branded as dangerous and unstable. Chloe's mom stood up next, pointing a trembling finger at me. Marrying my daughter to this fool was the biggest mistake of my life, she hissed. It wasn't rage in her eyes. It was the cold regret of ever letting me into their precious family. In the world of high-stakes legal battles, this was the nuclear option. No kids, no property battle. Just straight-up character assassination. They were trying to paint me as emotionally erratic because after my brother died, I did the responsible thing. I went to therapy and I got help. I told her everything back when we still had trust. Now, she was weaponizing my grief to secure a massive settlement. Then, the judge leaned forward and asked a question that turned the room into a vacuum. Do you really not understand who he is? Chloe's face froze. She blinked, her poor me mask slipping. Excuse me, she stammered. The judge didn't look angry. She just looked tired. I've seen this before, she said. A person takes someone kind and honest and uses those qualities like weapons until the story gets rewritten and the kind one becomes the crazy one. Chloe's lawyer tried to object, but the judge cut him off. She turned to me and said, Mr. Brenner, I remember the Prescott hearing. You were one of the only civilians who testified, even when it wasn't safe. I remember you. The ground didn't just shift. It opened up. Chloe looked at her lawyer, panicked, realizing her insanity angle just hit a brick wall. But she had no idea that while she was busy screaming, I had been staying strapped with receipts she didn't even know existed. The atmosphere shifted from a trial to an exposure. Chloe tried to backtrack, whispering, I didn't mean it like that. I was just upset. But I stayed silent. I didn't come to court to prove I was stable. I came to show her she couldn't define me anymore. See, when you try to rewrite someone's life, you better hope they haven't kept the receipts. The night before the hearing, her attorney's office sent over a summary of exhibits. But buried 2 pages deep in a batch of scanned PDFs was an accidental upload. A file Chloe was never supposed to include. It was a journal entry from her phone's notes app titled, Plan, Divorce Timeline / Mental Fitness Angle. I read her own words to the court. She detailed exactly how she would isolate me by leveraging my therapy records, how she'd use my grief over my brother to suggest I was dangerous. She even wrote, if I push the mental health angle hard enough, the court will back off. He'll fold. He always does. That file was time-stamped 3 weeks before she even served me the papers. I had forwarded it to the judge's clerk for an integrity review. As the judge read Chloe's playbook in total silence, the tension was so thick you could hear a pen roll off a table. +1. Then the doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Rachel Prescott walked in. The same Rachel from the abuse case years ago. Back then, she was a victim trying to survive. Now she was a community speaker and counselor. She took the stand and told the court how I'd driven 2 hours every day just to support her and other women during their trials. I've never once seen him act without integrity, she testified. Chloe's lawyer looked subdued, realizing their entire strategy had collapsed. But I had one final blow, Exhibit 17. An email exchange between Chloe and her friends discussing the exact phrases to use to paint me as unstable without triggering a psych hold. The judge took the envelope, read it for a full minute, and then looked at Chloe with a chilling calm. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of premeditated misrepresentation, he declared. The final ruling wasn't just a win, it was a total wipeout. Because Chloe had tried to commit fraud upon the court, the judge didn't just deny her alimony, he stripped her of everything. All claims filed by the petitioner, including requests for spousal support and joint property, are hereby denied, the judge announced. I was awarded full ownership of the marital residence and exemption from all shared debts. Miss Brenner, the judge said, his voice like a gavel. Courts exist to protect the truth. Your actions sought to exploit both the vulnerable and the law itself. Bang, it was over. Chloe walked past me in the hallway, her designer heels clicking too loud in the stillness she'd left behind. She thought she was going to cancel me and walk away with a paycheck. Instead, she walked away with a restitution of character judgment filed against her, a permanent legal record of her lies. By the following week, her perfect life crumbled. Her social media went dark because her victim story wasn't working anymore. The mutual friends she'd lied to started messaging me privately, saying they had no idea it was that bad. I didn't respond to the drama. I didn't need to. The best part of the truth is that it travels without a microphone. That night, I sat in my quiet house, a house that finally felt like a home again. I found a sticky note from my brother tucked in a book. Don't let anyone turn your pain into their spotlight. I smiled and pinned my new judicial advocacy certificate next to his old guitar. I didn't fight back with noise or screams. I waited, I documented, and I let her own words bury her. In the end, that silence was louder than anything she ever shouted in court. And if there's one thing I learned, it's that the truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs someone brave enough to stand still while the lies burn out. She tried to bury me, but she forgot I was the one holding the shovel. If you've ever had to fight a quiet war or watch someone try to rewrite your story, you know that having the receipts is the only way to stay upright. Drop a receipt in the comments. Have you ever caught someone in a lie that changed everything? Smash that like button. If you believe that silence can be the ultimate power move, subscribe and hit the bell. Don't miss our next story of calculated justice and the truth that finally hits home. Because around here, we don't just survive the drama, we end it with the truth. Stay sharp, stay documented, and I'll see you in the next one.